Landline this year embarked on an ambitious project to look at the opportunities and pitfalls facing Australian farmers and agribusinesses wanting to do business with China. With a market of almost 1.4 billion people, the potential in China can be overwhelming. And many Australian businesses, large and small, have rushed in. Some have cracked it, and others have been left with red China blues. Landline went with Australia's largest private delegation of farmers and food manufacturers to China. This was a milestone for Toowoomba's Wellcamp Airport, its first international passenger flight. The destination for 220 local farmers and business people, China.
If you'd have told me 10 years ago that you'd be flying out of Toowoomba on an international flight going to China, not in your wildest dreams.
The Chinese hunt in packs as well, and they really like that group mentality, and they know that, look, out of 200 and something people, there must be an Australian business for me in there somewhere.
The flight late last year was the realisation of a dream for the local Wagner family, which had China top of mind when it built the $200 million airport. It's a good time to do business. A new free trade agreement with China will see tariffs of up to 25% on Australian exports be eliminated within a decade.
You'll never get anything done unless you go and see it yourself. You've got to go and shake the hand of a Chinese person, work out what they're after.
This airport could make exporting from the southern Queensland agricultural region easier than ever, if these men and women can make the Chinese deals.
For us, the potential here is that we could harvest product today, cool it today, wash it, pack it, and have it on the plane today, this afternoon, and in China tomorrow morning.
From Toowoomba, population 114,000, to Shanghai, population 24 million. It's China's largest city and its mainland commercial and financial centre. The farmers and entrepreneurs heard from dozens of China experts, and there were lots of numbers to get their heads around. If Shanghai was a country, it alone would be Australia's 6th biggest export market. The Chinese are buying more food and better quality food, and those who can afford to favour countries with strong food safety standards. Consumer behaviour expert Anne Bierbauer explains the desire by telling people to just look out their windows.
So, you guys probably know, China's not a healthy place, right? The pollution is always talked about, and the air is really bad. 99% of urban consumers breathe air that's unsafe. So it's not just the pollution either, but also the supply chain. So supply chains are notoriously corrupt, I'd say, in China. So this picture is from the famous melamine scandal, and it's probably one of the most famous scandals, but really seems like there's a new scandal every week. So whether it's from rat meat being sold as lamb or 40-year-old meat being sold, there's always something new. And this has led Chinese consumers to really have a deep want for foreign products.
China is Australia's top agricultural export market, worth $9 billion. It's easy to be excited by the numbers, so Jeff Turner gives the same advice to every Australian eager to export.
We tell them if they're coming to do business in China, double the time they think it's going to take, double their budget and halve their expectations. Be very cautious and be very careful.
Meat and Livestock Australia advises exporters to narrow their market from the mass to the affluent middle class.
The thing with China, the numbers are big, so a 3% slice of a really big number is still a big number. So, over 7 million households, I think that's still a worthwhile target.
The affluent middle class is predicted to grow from 7 million to 30 million families in the next decade. They're the sort of consumers happy to shop at supermarkets like this, where Australian dairy, citrus, wine and beef commands top dollar. But Australian farmers are frustrated that despite the free trade agreement, many non-tariff barriers are blocking access to these shelves. While the Australian government works at its end, potential exporters have been advised to enlist help from the Chinese end.
As soon as you get the Chinese companies in the camp with you and there's a commercial potential there, you'll get a lot more motivation from the Chinese government in negotiations and getting a protocol or resolving an access issue. We did it in the wool industry and we'll do it in other sectors now.
At the beef importing company Lianhao Foods, delegates saw just how tough competition for China's mass middle class is. It imports 6,000 tonnes of Australian beef a year, but in the cold room was the competition. Lianhao's in a price-sensitive volume market, so when Australian beef goes up by even a few cents, it buys less. It's opening a string of retail shops, so the opportunities are there for Australian beef if the price is right. Lianhao's entered the booming e-commerce market too. These frozen steaks will be couriered within 24 hours of being ordered.
This is one of our organic pancake mix products, so the consumer just fills it up to this line with milk.
Queensland-based Kyalla Pure Foods has narrowed its market and found Chinese customers who'll pay a premium for its organic grains. Quentin Kennedy's ambitions are being helped by Leo Shen's online store, Fresh, which sells Australian cherries, beef, citrus and fresh milk.
We are already the largest one selling Australian imported milks online. Now we want something convenient.
QR codes are big in China, so Kyalla's using them too.
Hi, I'm Steve. My family's been farming in this area since the 1930s.
They scan a QR code on the product, they enter in the batch number and they see 1 or 2 or 3, sometimes it's up to 3 farmers who grew the wheat that's in that flour. They can see a video of those growers, they can see a farm location on a Google's map, there's still photography and then also some general background story about that grower.
A string of highly publicised food safety scandals has rocked the Chinese public's trust in local food. Despite arrests and tough new laws, Leo Shen says Australian produce has an edge.
Australian in Chinese mind it's more like a very pure, a very clean environment. That is why we think the Australian products is, it's kind of more healthy, it's more premium, and our customer is looking for this kind of quality.
Alibaba is the world's biggest e-commerce business. 2 hours from Shanghai lies its sprawling campus. Alibaba's platforms connect buyers and sellers. Think a Chinese Amazon and eBay, but bigger. With 10 million merchants selling to 400 million consumers.
This is really a game changer. In last year, 413 million online consumers spent more than $750 billion online alone. And this is going to be changed because lots of those places you probably can never reach to it, but with online tour, with your products, and now Alibaba, Tmall, Australian Post, all those people, and you can work with, bring your products through the online channel to China.
Today in China, e-commerce is commerce, and hundreds of millions of consumers connect through Alibaba's growing ecosystem.
1,300 Australian businesses are on Alibaba, selling beef, honey and nuts, baby formula and vitamins. You can buy 2 Wagyu steaks or a 20-foot container of beef.
And we feel that connecting us all with commercial opportunity will make China better and the world better.
It was mind-boggling. Like the figures on that screen were just mind-boggling. I didn't realise that there was such an e-commerce business anywhere in the world.
It was fascinating just to understand that sort of supply chain and the volume of transactions that happen in this country.
In July, Australian nut producer Starman Farms, which already exports bulk nut in shell to China, launched branded packs on Alibaba.
And it's a bit of an experiment for us, so it was putting our feet into the market. There's lots of ways to do it differently, and we're just seeing whether the chosen path is the right one.
The company has hired Chinese staff to help it negotiate the unfamiliar e-commerce world.
It's a bit fresh for us and for me, but it's still worth looking and seeing where they're trying to get to, and if it's the way of the future, we have to understand it and then choose the direction we go within that future.
E-commerce means millions of parcels, an opportunity which Australia Post has grabbed by joining with China Post to form Saichen, which stores, packs, tracks and sends the merchandise. 10% of the stock here is Australian.
They're healthcare and infant, milk powder. The good thing for Australia, which is we are able to bring more and more very premium and good quality products from Australia to China to introduce Chinese consumers.
A mistrust of traditional advertising also means Chinese consumers turn to recommendations from relatives, friends and celebrities, which are all on social media. Sanitarium tapped into the power of influencers by getting Weet-Bix eaten on a popular Chinese reality show.
The sales went through the roof, so generally we have 6 to 8 weeks of stock coverage here on the ground in China. That sold out in 2 days. We had massive response from the Chinese community in Australia who were sending a lot of product up here, and we've seen a huge increase in sales on an ongoing basis since that time.
After 3 intense days visiting airports and ports and seeing the high-tech ways China is dealing with the rising volume of imports, delegates finished with some pub rock and an Aussie barbecue. For some, the trip helped them realise they're not ready to tackle such a daunting market. For others, it fired them up.
We see an opportunity in the middle class, higher income people. E-commerce is really big over here, so there's going to be some great opportunities if we can get the distribution sorted out.
It probably just reaffirmed the fact that, how difficult China really is. But we're up here and we're committed to the market.
It's going to come down to our political leaders. They're going to make this opportunity happen or not. There's 200 odd Australians standing behind me here in a bar that all paid their own way to be here, and I think the people of the political landscape at home need to see that and follow it up with the same level of enthusiasm to make it work.
Between 70 and 80% of the Australian wool clip ends up in China. Most wool arrives in the raw and greasy state to be processed and turned into garments. But as Prue Adams reports, the Chinese middle class means there's also an increasing demand for high-end wool garments.
It's a glimpse inside the labour-intensive, high-tech world of wool manufacturing. And it begins in the city of Zhangjiagang, about 150 kilometres northwest of Shanghai. Situated on the Yangtze River, Zhangjiagang has become a major domestic port town and is home to one of China's 11 free trade zones. It's a hub for the world's biggest food and textile companies. They're able to bring goods in, process and re-export without hefty tariffs. It's also the city where most of our wool ends up. Tianyu takes about 10% of the Australian wool clip. The company buys at auction, imports to China and scours, That means washing out the grease and dirt. Landline's visit to Tianyu coincided with the arrival of a busload of Australian wool growers. Helen Hahn often hosts these sorts of tours.
When they come to Tianyu, they're always trying to find the wools from their own farm.
This is the 100% of Australian wool, 17.5 micron.
What becomes clear in visiting places like Tianyu is that while the Australian wool industry is very dependent on Chinese manufacturing, it goes both ways. Companies like this couldn't exist without our wool.
80% of wools are from Australia. Now we purchase wool globally. The main supplying country is Australia, and then New Zealand and South Africa and some countries of South America.
Do you ever get concerned that the Australian wool industry is too reliant on China?
We are a little concerned from time to time, but really they buy our wool, they pay for it, and they process in a very, very good manner.
Well, Tianyu is an early stage processor of wool. On the other side of Zhangjiagang, Sunshine Group is a massive, vertically integrated business, doing everything from scouring to suiting. From the marbled front foyer to the impressive boardroom, it's clear this is no rundown sweatshop. The 30-year-old company is the world's biggest producer of worsted fabric, typically used in making tailored garments. Director Cao Shuming says it's also been the world's single biggest user of Australian wool.
阳光是澳洲羊毛最大的一个使用的生产企业，因为从30年来的话，阳光的面料呢，几乎99%以上使用的都是澳洲羊毛，所以说我感觉的呢，阳光和澳洲是一家人。
Inside Sunshine's 140-hectare manufacturing plant, yarn is spun, then woven into fabric. 15,000 employees produce a staggering 35,000 kilometres of fabric each year, making 3.5 million suits.
This suit we made for a UK brand called Eagle.
You're obviously the base of younger farmers. What do you think the future is for the wool industry now that you've seen the China end?
Yeah, it is encouraging. They do like the woolen products, so yeah, I think if we can keep producing them they'll keep using it.
Yeah, and Sam, you...
Yeah, I think the same, and what they can do with it these days, they're doing more and more things with it all the time. You know, they're not just sewing wool together and making clothing. You know, they're doing a lot of things with it, so that's encouraging. And as us, you know, it looks like there is a future there. Yeah.
Just telling them about your coat.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Jacket.
No synthetic line.
So where are they in the showroom?
In Sunshine's showroom, the Australian farmers get an insight into the innovation Chinese manufacturers employ to make wool marketable.
Yeah, it's amazing the quality of the product. I just can't get over a bunch of wool as being heavy, fluffy things you put on your feet. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
The cold black technology results in the fabric being up to 10 degrees cooler than normal. It's pitched at the Japanese market, where men wear black suits year-round.
Because the dark color will absorb the energy from the light. But this technology, will reflect the energy, not absorb.
Really?
So yeah, even you wear the garments under the sunlight, you will not feel so warm, so hot.
Then there's the phenomenon of the double-faced material. Usually with a different colour on each side and with no need for lining, the product single-handedly drove up the demand for Australian wool in 2014, according to international wool analyst Chris Wilcox.
Everybody got involved in it here in China. There was a huge surge demand for this type of fabric from manufacturers, from garment manufacturers, all the way through to the fabric makers.
But fashion is fickle, and in the past 12 months, demand has dipped.
Still going okay this year, but it has to be good quality fabric. And so some of that frenzy has really fallen away. But this is what's driven the price for merino cardings in Australia.
If you're talking technology, it's hard to go past this place. Jointly funded by the Shinao Company and AWI, the new Knitwear Development Centre is full of textile scientists whose mission it is to find new ways with wool.
So we invested a lot of IP in the Shinao Knitwear Development Centre, and the reason we've done that is to try and firstly help them come up with new innovations. So we can run trials, whether it be dyeing trials, finishing trials, knitting trials, to come up with these new innovations.
You know, the wool here are from Australia. Okay.
Shinao is a leader in the spinning industry, supplying yarn for the knitwear sector. Publicly listed on the Shanghai Stock Exchange in 2014, it employs more than 2,000 people. CEO Zhao Xiaotian walks me through the many spinning stages.
We have been always using Australian wool, more than nowadays more than 80%. But if we go back, say 10 years ago, maybe more than 90% are from Australia.
Interestingly, Shinao sources more wool from South Africa than it once did, because European customers are demanding wool from sheep that haven't been mulesed. That's the treatment where skin is cut off the back end of the sheep to prevent fly strike.
Because they think the wool from South Africa is not mulesing. They know there's no mulesing action in South Africa. But nowadays the availability of non-mulesing wool from Australia also getting more and more. So we can also sourcing more and more non-mulesing wool from Australia now.
Within wool processing, there are two main streams. There are the weavers, which predominantly make the suiting fabric, and then there are the knitters, and that's what these machines are doing. And it's in the knitwear where there is increasing demand for so-called next-to-skin and functional fibres to be made into sportswear and activewear.
The lifeblood of our consumer demand has always been in traditional formal suiting, and we're very much geared up to support that, and we always will be. But as you see consumer behaviour change and people wanting to move into sportswear and activewear and functional fibres with odour management and moisture management, we're probably seeing more growth in that area. Without a doubt, I'd say with 28 years in the industry, I'd say I've never been more optimistic about wool's opportunities.
You can't really look at the issue of wool in China without visiting Nanjing. About 300 kilometres inland of Shanghai, this city of 15 million people is where you find the Nanjing wool market. It's the body that governs the Chinese wool industry. Its main role is to promote the use of wool, connecting suppliers and buyers, and giving pricing and production advice for China's own wool growers. There are millions of sheep in China, but they are mostly in remote regions, largely farmed for meat, and the wool side of things is not supported or promoted. It means the country's wool processors rely almost completely on the imported raw product, with most of that coming from Australia. Madam Young is a formidable force in the world of wool. As president of the Nanjing wool market and a central government official, she has her finger on the pulse of international supply and demand.
这个呢，应该来说，中国也不是过于集中依赖一个国家。现在南非的产量也不断的在增加，所以南非也是美丽炉这一块也是弥补的。 另外呢，出织毛新西兰市场，包括欧洲市场，所以中国羊毛的依赖本身是依赖全球，还有我们自己国家的产量。
Madam Young believes the current price of wool, which sits at around $14 a kilogram, is too high to be competitive.
主要呢是其他纤维，比如棉花、化纤等纤维的价格，在这6年之内回落得非常厉害，所以羊毛跟其他纤维的相比，纺织纤维的相比，性价比就不合适了，就显得高了。这需求降低也是因为就是成品对羊毛原料的价格的消化接受不了，就是成本太高了，所以大家转而寻求更加廉价的纺织原料来生产我们的成品。
Look, there's always going to be some banter about wool prices. I actually don't think China are that adverse to the price at the moment. What they are adverse to is volatility. In the last 6 years, I think it's fair to say that the wool's been well over $10 a kilo clean. So the volatility, in my mind, has actually disappeared quite a lot.
Chinese processors are concerned, though, at the low numbers of Australian sheep, and they'd like to see more wool produced.
我们认为澳洲牧民应该多养一点羊，提高一下产量，或者在品种上能够综合一下。
15 years ago, a handful of like-minded wool producers joined forces, forming the brand Flinders Merino. When they visited China and Hong Kong, though, they realised young designers weren't using wool. So the group established a scholarship for fashion students to encourage them to keep wool in mind.
This is the first time we saw that the real sheep sharing, right? Yeah. In the past, but we only see in the video.
Every year, the prize winner and other wool-interested students are sent to Australia to see exactly where their yarn comes from and to learn more about its unique properties. The marketing messages seem to be seeping in.
You use sportswear nowadays synthetic fibre, but that is not breathable. It's sometimes sticky when you just got lots of sweat, but wool material can bring out sweat and breathable, and you feel very comfortable by wearing it.
The big picture there, I think, is creating a relationship, and the relationship is not so much Flinders Merino, but the fact that we've got young people that we're using other fibres other than wool that are now using wool, and being young designers, they're the future of our industry at the retail level.
Perhaps one day these young designers can aspire to the lofty heights of this woman. Lu Yen was China's first supermodel. After a decade on the catwalks of Europe, she returned to China to create her own fashion label. Her brand, Comhua, has taken off. And last year, Lu Yen became the first designer in China to collaborate with Australia's Woolmark company to produce a range of wool-rich garments.
So you can mix with the dress and with the top. So this is more feminine. It's more like out of stage. Yes. And so they're all like a wood, like 85% wood.
So 85% wool. So the China Rouge line came out in time for Christmas, and apart from being sold through Comhua stores, was picked up by Asia's leading luxury retailer, Lane Crawford.
Chinese consumers, men and women who go out and buy clothing, do you think they understand where wool comes from?
They understand the wool is present quality, high quality, 100% natural, but they don't understand how the process, how they make it, what's the difference? No, I don't think they know. But that's probably the woman should do, promote more.
Coming up, selling premium Aussie beef to China.
The most expensive?
a 180-gram Blackmore's fillet at 424 Australian dollars. Pork is the most popular protein in China, closely followed by chicken. Together, the white meats make up 80% of the country's meat protein market. But the demand for beef is growing as diets change and incomes rise. One Australian company is capitalising on this, but it's taken a decade to report its first profit. As China's economy opened up and boomed, a desire for luxury imports was unleashed. Brands matter here, and those who can afford it prefer high-end Western labels.
What's your favourite brand? Dior.
These women love eating out too, especially Western food.
What do your grandparents and parents think about how much money you spend on food, eating out?
They have some tough understanding about that because they think maybe we shouldn't spend that much on food.
Here, the Louis Vuitton of protein is beef. This 9+ Wagyu strip loin costs $540 a kilo. The preference for fresh over frozen gives Australia an advantage, as we're the only country that's been granted chilled access. Officially, there's no US beef here. The Chinese government banned it in 2003. The US is expected to be let back in this year, but Meat and Livestock Australia has made the most of its 13-year absence, heavily promoting Australian beef as prestigious, safe and healthy.
So since 2012, when we got significant more access for our Australian processing plants, we saw a rapid increase, went from about 5,000 tonnes to 150,000 tonnes, so a huge jump.
But most Chinese buy their beef at markets like this, where local, not imported beef dominates.
It's all local beef here from Chinese cattle, and it's all freshly supplied to this market.
How important is fresh versus frozen here?
Yeah, so fresh is the number one driver for consumers. That's what they look for. They want to. That's their number one purchasing decision. Is it fresh?
China is the world's biggest consumer of pork. Here, it accounts for a huge 63% of meat consumption. The next most popular protein? Seafood and poultry at 23%. Beef share is small, making up just 8% of the Chinese meat diet.
Beef's about $17 a kilo that we saw there, and the pork's about a third of that. So you can sort of see the difference, and that drives the consumption.
Australia's share of China's beef market might be just 2.6%, but that small slice is worth $1 billion. With China's beef consumption predicted to grow 10% a year and import tariffs of up to 25% to be eliminated by 2026, the outlook for Australian beef is bright. Elders is one of the Australian beef industry's China success stories.
In good years here, we're growing at 25%. In quiet years, we're growing at around 5 to 10. We're seeing a lot of chains from the USA and Europe stepping into the space in China, and there's still new hotel openings as well.
But success hasn't been easy or quick. 2015 was Elders' first profitable year here. It made it into the black after losing money for 11 years.
There is a lot of hype in Australia about China, and I think the hype is warranted, but I don't think people understand fully the complexity of doing business in China. If you're struggling in Australia and you get bamboozled by the numbers in China, and you think that all you have to do is come up here and automatically there's going to be big orders and you're going to multiply your business by 10 and you'll be saved, China will more likely send you down rather than up.
Elders moved into China early when it bought this beef importing operation in Shanghai in 2004. Then the beef market was tiny. Growth was slow, so it started selling Australian food and wine. But after losing money for several years, the business was closed. Why didn't that work?
I think it was focus more than anything else, I think in such a complex market like China, you need to be very good at what you do, and if you do too many product categories, you spread across too large a range, and I don't think you do any of it very well.
Its online operation lost money too. 2% of sales chewed up 15% of the costs. The two costly failures forced Elders to focus on what it did best, beef. 3 years ago, it restyled itself as a distributor of prestige Australian brands exclusive to Elders, and it targeted just one market, fine dining.
Okay, pick up the 9 plates for the table.
Five-star Shanghai restaurant Cha is a typical customer. It's expensive. Steaks are several $100s each. The most expensive, a 180-gram Blackmore's fillet at $424 Australian dollars. The beef menu here is exclusively Australian, and all the brands are from Elders distribution stable. Chef Wilmer's diners are fussy.
They ask me, where this product come from? Do you know? Or sometimes they even ask me, what supplier do you use? They want to make sure that the products that they're having is exactly what they're paying for, and we're very well known for our traceability.
Craig Aldous can't see Wagyu's superstar status slowing down.
When I arrived here 10 years ago, Wagyu was nowhere to be seen. And we were one of the pioneers in China to import Wagyu from Australia, and we've seen it, just explode.
In the past, Elders has tried partnering with Chinese companies, but now prefers going it alone. As for customers, it favours international hotel chains, as there's a mutual understanding about business practices.
There's a lot of talk about relationship that you'll hear back in Australia from companies talking about doing business in China. But some of those types of relationships would be regarded as unethical or illegal the way that we operate back in Australia. So you're trying to navigate through that way of doing business and still do things legally or ethically by Australian standards can be extremely challenging, and that's another reason why you need to give yourself a lot of time.
This is the heart of the Elders operation. Chilled and frozen Australian beef is cut to customer specifications.
So what we're about to cut here now is some Marble 4 strip loin from Stanbroke in Queensland. So we market this under the Diamantina brand, and this will be cut into 250-gram portions today, and this will be going to Morton's Steakhouse in Beijing and Shanghai. Morton's originally started in Chicago in the USA, so it's a very famous high-end steak chain in the States, and they're expanding throughout Asia.
Elders' latest contract is for China's first Hard Rock Cafe, a coup as the chain has expansion plans.
I remember the first time they came to Shanghai 5 years ago, you barely could find beef on the markets. There were 1 or 2 steakhouses in Shanghai, probably this one one of the first ones to be in Shanghai at that time. Nowadays, I think there are around 50 steakhouses, and you can find beef in all the supermarkets.
Our grain-fed sector is growing over the last 12 months. We're up 20%. So, those people looking for that higher-end grain-fed steak product at a restaurant, they can find that and we can compete there.
The popularity of Western food in China has meant rising demand for burgers.
So this is the burger processing room. and we've got an automated line. We've imported this machinery from the US.
So Elders does burgers, Wagyu and regular. Blue Frog, a high-end chain, buys from Elders. It's run by Australian expat Coralie Danks, a banker who grew up in the Pilbara. Despite recent price hikes, the restaurant's beef sales have grown. South American beef is cheaper, but Coralie buys Australian because of its reputation for quality.
Primarily, it's the most famous brand or country of origin for Chinese customers. They know Australian beef and they consider it to be premium beef. This just comes from a place that they know where the water source is good, the air is clean, the ground is clean, and they're getting a product that is healthy.
Customer concern about food safety is another reason she chose Elders.
They control the supply chain, and that's very important to us, that we have a supplier that controls the supply chain from when that beef leaves Australia to when it lands at our restaurants.
The American-owned chain says it won't drop Elders when US beef is allowed back into China.
No, definitely not. Our Australian beef is the cornerstone of our menu, our steaks and our burgers, and we will continue to offer Australian beef.
Craig Aldous says the market here is big enough for more players, especially for chilled beef, which withstood last year's demand slide. He shares the frustration of Australian export beef processors locked out of China because they can't get accreditation. He says more Chinese investment in Australia will help solve access issues.
I believe that if there is a product that is currently not allowed into China, but a Chinese investor acquires a business in Australia that is exporting that product, then the chances of getting access for this product into China are dramatically improved.
Only 12 Australian abattoirs are accredited, but MLA says the Chinese could approve many more.
So it's quite a rigorous process. We have to work with the Chinese government to get the plants accredited. They do inspections, and we're now waiting for another 30 plants to get accredited.
We've got a company that lost its chilled accreditation status. It had it 4 years ago and now has lost it. It'd like to get it back.
4 processors in southeast Queensland alone want to fly chilled beef from Toowoomba, but they can't. The industry is getting impatient.
If we fill one of those Cathay Pacific planes with their product, 115 tonnes up to Hong Kong and then on into mainland China, which is the driver of that business, it's around $7 million a plane of produce.
Most companies doing well in China will tell you they lost money before they made it. Elders' faith in China has finally been rewarded, and it hopes those with a China plan learn from its mistakes and aren't put off by the time it took it to get into the black.
I hope that people have returned to Australia being very excited about China, but just understanding that the better they do their homework before they start, the higher the chances of success.